Welcome to another episode of Pilots Say What, where we get to hear what pilots have to say. And today we'll be speaking with John. John is a special guest. I'm excited to speak to John because he's part of the NTSB, and there's a whole story behind that. If you don't know anything about the NTSB or what it even stands for, he'll let us know. I won't do you any injustice by attempting to introduce you. Would you mind introducing yourself, please?
You bet. Thank you. I'm glad to be here, by the way. My name is John Duluth, and I'm currently a board member at the National Transportation Safety Board, otherwise known as the NTSB.
Hmm.
So I got started. I went to college, and I've always wanted to fly airplanes. I used to watch airplanes on my parents' black and white TV, and I was always motivated to do that. We had a small little airport in Michigan at Kent County Airport, and they flew Convair 580s for North Central Airlines. And I thought that was the coolest thing because they made a lot of smoke, made a lot of noise, and I thought that was cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I've always been interested in flying airplanes, and I went to college, and I was very fortunate to receive a scholarship
Okay.
from the United States Air Force, which essentially said, we'll pay for your college, but then you have to fly for 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
Which, that's a great deal, right?
Yeah, deal.
So that was an easy one to sign. So I was fortunate. I went to the U.S. Air Force. I flew C-130s for the most part, special ops background,
Wow.
different areas of the 130. Totally loved it. Enjoyed every minute of it.
Uh-huh.
I'd do it again tomorrow if they let me. But because of the family and all that, I felt it was prudent to transition to the airlines. So I went and was lucky to go fly for American Airlines. I flew for American for 35 years. And I just retired about 2 months ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. I was very fortunate to be a captain on the 787, which was my last jet that I flew, and had my family, some of my family on the last flight, particularly my little grandson Liam.
Right.
And so I really enjoyed that. But I was once again I was fortunate
Mhm.
because of my safety background
Mhm.
that I was nominated by the President of the United States to
Okay.
be a board member for the National Transportation Safety Board.
Right.
So I was confirmed by the U.S. Senate in March.
That's awesome.
Actually, it was the end of February, and I was sworn in the middle of March. And so once I became a government employee for the NTSB,
Hmm.
I had to resign from American Airlines. So
Right.
I'm fully retired from American, and
Mhm.
I'm now doing my job with working for the American people
Yeah.
as a board member for the National Transportation Safety Board.
Right. You still find yourself all over the U.S., right? It seems like.
I do.
Yeah.
So that's a great question. So the NTSB is an independent agency. It's charged by
Mhm.
Congress for investigating all civil aviation accidents in the United States, as well as significant events in other modes of transportation, like
Right.
railroads and commercial space, for instance, pipeline, maritime.
Mhm.
And so because of that, you're right. The NTSB finds itself now.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily go to all the accident sites, by the way, to be clear.
Okay.
As a
Okay.
board member, we only launch for significant events or when it's decided that we should go for public reasons.
Mhm.
That's a decision made by the chairwoman currently.
Right.
But we investigators are gone all the time. So part of my job as a board member
Yes.
is to advocate for what safety recommendations that the NTSB has come up with,
Okay.
and also to do things like a podcast.
Right. Yeah, and that way you get to educate even more people on how you guys work. On that note, how does it differ from the FAA? I just want to make this distinction early on.
Man, that is a great question.
Yeah.
So the FAA, who of course I've dealt with over years being a pilot,
Mhm.
so the FAA is a regulator,
Okay.
and rightfully so. They are verifying that people's our standards are up to speed. So they're responsible for for a lot of people that are watching this
Mhm.
that don't want to be pilots. You're certificated, and so
Mhm.
the FAA is the one that certificates you or is making sure you can comply with the minimum standards to be a pilot or a
Right.
mechanic or a dispatcher, actually.
Right.
So the NTSB is not a regulator. So
Okay.
we're an independent agency for looking for safety,
Mhm.
investigating accidents, and coming out with probable causes and safety recommendations.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
we are not a regulator.
Okay, and if someone's training to be a pilot, maybe they're a low time pilot, or maybe they've worked their way into flying jets, or even in the airlines. In what ways would they be interacting or looking to the NTSB?
Wow, that is a good question.
Yeah.
So I would have to say that most pilots will probably never be involved with the NTSB. The only time that a pilot would probably find himself, or a mechanic or a
Hmm.
dispatcher for the airlines, would find
Right.
themselves involved with the NTSB if there was an accident.
Okay.
So when there's an accident, the NTSB is the agency in charge of the investigation.
Right.
So
Right.
I think this would be useful to the people listening. The NTSB works on what they call the party system.
Okay.
So if there was an accident, the people there are certain people that would be considered, part of the party. Let's call it that, which would be like the manufacturer of the airplane, potentially the engine manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
If it was an airline, it would be the airline itself, probably the labor association with the airline.
Okay.
Could be the Air Traffic Controller Association. So there's a number of people that are there, and the reason that they're part of the party status is they're the subject matter experts to help the NTSB gather the facts and everything. They don't do the parties don't do the analysis. They don't come up with the safety recommendations per se.
Okay.
They get to submit their input.
Mm-hmm.
But so the party system works very well because you're getting this technical expertise to assist you
Right.
as you come up with what happened. Okay, so that's what
People
it is.
who work in the industry or have worked in the industry.
Yeah, so that's it. So the reason is if there's a pilot involved in the accident, the pilot might have to write a report.
Okay.
For instance, for the NTSB, he or she might also be interviewed by the NTSB.
Mm-hmm.
But that would be their only interaction really with the NTSB. It would be rare for a pilot to actually have interaction with the NTSB. But what I would suggest to your team.
Yes, and that's what I wanted to ask you about.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, you were going to get probably to the point we were talking earlier a little bit about it. You guys do put out a lot of information that could be useful to anyone working in aviation, especially pilots, right? And is that where you were maybe going to go?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would have to say that what the NTSB can do for pilots, particularly in your group, you've got younger pilots, people want to be professional pilots in commercial aviation, for instance, or in any mode of transport, at any of the airline positions, actually. Mm-hmm. One of the best ways to learn is to find what other people may have done wrong or right.
Right.
And so the NTSB has an excellent database that can be queried by the public. The system is called CAROL, CAROL, and that's a system that anybody in your school can query, and they can look for accidents. And because you may have read or heard something and thought, oh, I wonder what that's about. The NTSB will have the entire docket. It's a public. We're a very transparent agency, and it allows you to review it. And I will tell you that no matter what accident you read in aviation, there's a lesson to be learned as a pilot, because you may go, oh, I already do that. So it reinforces what you already do, or you might see something and go, ooh, I might've done that. Yeah. So for me personally, I've always been interested not interested in accidents, but I'm interested in reports from accidents, so you can learn and not have to repeat those same events.
Right.
So that's where the NTSB, you wouldn't as a pilot interface with the NTSB, but that's where I would recommend pilots do interface with the NTSB, is to review previous accidents and learn from those.
Gotcha. And I'm wondering what would prompt them to do that. I know, for example, we always have one of our CFIs dedicated to any sort of even near accident report that we might have. We have a way of going through and reviewing and making sure that our CFIs and our students are staying on track with new safety tips and things like that. So I'm going to make sure to talk to him about CAROL to see if they're using that as a resource at the moment, because I think that's really interesting, actually. So I want to zoom out a little bit. We talked about a lot of cool things already. I can think of a million questions. I want to ask you about your airline career just a little bit more. I know that's going to be super relevant to some of our listeners and viewers. We are a flight school after all, fast-paced program, Part 141, the whole thing. What is something that I want to know what one of your biggest takeaways from having a civilian airline pilot career is, especially coming out of the military? I say that because there's a lot of people look forward to the lifestyle, and I'm wondering if there's anything that you could say was maybe just even your favorite part of it. It's a really basic question, but
no, I think that's a fair question. So I had 35 years at American Airlines, and I absolutely loved what I did. It was great. But I will have to say, I started out as a flight engineer on a 727. That's where at the time, that's where everybody went to, is they were an engineer either on the 727 or the DC-10. That was kind of the float. Actually included the 747, because at the time American had 74s. But then I transitioned to what we called the MD-80 at American, called it that. DC-9 essentially was the type of aircraft. But I got to do that. You flew everywhere. You got to go around the domestic flight, all the different airports. So I enjoyed the domestic flying. I thought it was, you were gone 2 or 3 days out of the week. About 10 years ago, before I retired, I transitioned to what we call the wide body, the 787.
Right.
And I know a lot of people were like, well, I don't know, the international flying. I enjoyed it.
Okay. Because it's a long flight, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I used to fly, for instance, from Dallas to either Shanghai or let's say Incheon, Korea,
Wow.
or Narita, Japan,
Hmm.
and those are 14 to 15-hour flights.
Yeah.
So we would fly with 4 pilots.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a captain with 3 first officers,
Okay.
and you would manage it in the sense that the captain FO would fly for 3.5 hours roughly. Then
Hmm.
then they would go back and take a nap or relax. Then the other pilots would come up. We learned over time to have a good debrief during the switchover, the changeover, we call it.
Right.
So, in a period of a 15-hour flight, you get 2 breaks
Hmm.
of roughly 3 to 3.5 hours, depending on how fast you're going and what the winds are like, because you
Yeah.
might be less than 15 hours. So,
Copy.
but I found the wide body flying, in some sense, it's a little easier because you're flying a 7-8, which was just an amazing aircraft.
Hmm.
I mean, I tell people that we were typically flying at 40 to 41,000 feet. You're just under 9/10 the speed of sound. It was an airplane that could do a single engine Category 3 Autoland. So it's an amazing machine. But so the flying aspect of the airplane was the flying piece was actually fairly easy. But there's a lot of information and a lot of knowledge required for international flying
Okay.
because you're going to different countries.
Mm.
So it's challenging. I mean, and you're constantly having to decide, if I have an engine issue, where would I divert?
Right.
Would I
And when you're in
divert?
a whole nother part of the world.
It's a
Yeah.
totally different story. So
Yeah.
that is something that requires experience and wisdom.
Hmm.
There were pilots at American Airlines that I would say were even more. Well, they were definitely had more expertise than me in that regard because they worked in the training department or the
Right.
flight department. But that's great flying.
Right.
It's just challenging, but different reasons.
Right.
So, but then you're gone for 2 or 3 days, but then you're off for 3 or 4 days because it's an international flight. You have to have fatigue rules and all that.
Hmm.
So I really like that kind of flying. So I think when you ask, as you go in your career of being a commercial pilot, you usually start with smaller aircraft. You're probably going to start. A lot of folks will start at regional carriers,
Hmm.
which are, by the way, they are just as safe as a commercial 121 carrier, for instance, a legacy carrier.
Right.
Their training is just as difficult, in my opinion.
Hmm.
And the airplanes, some of the newer regional jets are really modern airplanes,
Yeah.
which is a good transition to go into the airlines like Delta or Southwest,
Right. Right. Right.
because those are very modern aircraft too.
Hmm.
But I think that what you'll see is that lifestyle sounds great and everybody sounds great. I've worked 2 or 3 days. I'm off for 3 or 4 days. That's great.
Yeah.
But you have to remember, if you're a commercial pilot, you are a professional pilot,
Mm.
and I'm all about our profession.
Right.
So I've told a number of people that my son is a doctor.
Okay.
My son's name is Peter,
Right.
and I'm subject, as a commercial pilot. We were subject to random drug and alcohol tests. It's
Right.
great. Doctors are not necessarily.
Right.
I have to take a check ride once a year.
Yeah.
Doctors don't necessarily take a check ride once a year.
Right.
I have to come to work in a uniform, and it's not the uniform I want. It's the uniform that the company says you will
Mm.
wear, which is why they call it a uniform. We all look the same.
Right.
But that's part of being a profession. I have to pass. We had distance learning.
Mhm.
Some people, I know everybody here would know that, but a lot of people who are not pilots don't realize that if you're a pilot, you're going to get a physical every 6 months, a class 1 physical.
Yeah.
So I mean, you have to. Those are and doctors don't necessarily have to get a physical. So
Right.
when you consider all that aspects, that makes you a professional pilot.
Right.
And being a professional,
It's rigid in that way, but because it's necessary.
it is necessary.
Yeah.
It's absolutely necessary, and it's not the airlines that decide some of this. It's the FAA who is saying you need to do this, which
Mhm.
I'm okay with that. I've
Yeah.
lived under that rule, and it's a good one. I think it's okay. But I would say that with all that,
Yes, sir.
it's a great lifestyle. But I think what people too have to realize too is that once you get into like the people that are in your school, and they go to the regional carriers, you have to work hard all the time.
Right.
When you go through training, training is serious stuff. And when you go through the simulator schedule, it's not like you get a simulator and you're off for 2 weeks. No, it's a sim every day almost, and it's designed that way
Mhm.
so that you have proficiency and you're going to correct the mistakes you made the day prior.
Mhm.
So I've heard from pilots before, they're really student pilots that say, "Man, the schedule here is grueling."
Yeah.
That is the schedule. And when you get older and you transition from one aircraft type to another one, you're going to do the same thing again.
Mhm.
It's intended to be to your benefit, but you have to study. You've got to get your sleep, and I mean, you expected to show up for your sims rested and
Mhm.
prepared.
Mhm.
Your examiners and your instructors will appreciate you showing up
Mm.
prepared to go fly, rested to go fly, And that is how you make it to the training environment.
Absolutely. We've talked to so many of our own CFIs and even some airline pilots here on the podcast, and it translates right into what you're saying. They always ask, "What's your advice to your students? What's some of the most common advice you
Mm.
have?" And it's always be prepared. It's always about professionalism, and typically it's in ways that people don't expect. It's the showing up on time, getting enough rest, knowing what you're doing before you get there, that sort of thing. And I guess it's just funny how far up the line that makes it. We just had Joe Johnson on, and I'm mentioning that to you. I mentioned it to you earlier, but for anyone who's listening, he talked all about. He worked as a check airman for quite some time, and so he talked all about the training process once you're moving into the airlines.
Mhm.
So for what you're saying, what Joe said, I think you guys should really listen to what these guys have to say, especially if you're listening to this podcast, because I don't know, I've never heard about any of this until I talked to you guys.
Oh.
I think a lot of our students want to know what to look forward to. So thank you for covering some of that. I was actually going to ask you about that training. You mentioned your safety background, right? I
Mhm.
want to understand that a little bit more because I know that now what you do in safety, right? But what kind of qualified you to end up on the NTSB? If you
Well,
don't
I
mind me
would have to
asking.
say that, I was always when I started with the airlines, the big thing that has happened in the airline industry is what they call safety management systems. We
Okay.
refer to as SMS.
Hmm.
And when that was coming out, I remember back in the part of SMS is something called the Aviation Safety Action Program. We
Okay.
refer to it as ASAP.
Mm.
So ASAP is a general term now that all airline pilots and mechanics, dispatchers, flight attendants are aware of. It's if you were to fly on any carrier in the United States,
Hmm.
and when you get off the airplane and you were to, instead of telling the pilot great landing,
Yeah.
if you were to ask that pilot, do you have an ASAP program? They're going to say they do. So all the
Okay.
airlines have an ASAP program,
Okay.
or that's what they have.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the SMS process. And when ASAP first came out
Mm.
at American Airlines and this concept was brought forward, it's really about confidentially and voluntarily reporting mistakes.
Mm.
So as a pilot, you make a mistake in holding, you would voluntarily tell that you made a mistake in holding.
Right.
Well, that seems very foreign to most people.
Yeah.
But in the industry that the airlines are in,
Mhm.
that is a standard practice. And
Okay.
so it's not about discipline or terminating people. It's about saying, well, how did you make that mistake? Was that something that you did because you not
Mm.
prepared, or was it because there was something else like a systemic issue? And many times we find it's a systemic issue, like a bad fix that's not spelled correctly or mispronounced, for instance.
Right.
So I think, in my opinion, the reason the airlines are as safe as they are today is
Mhm.
because of the safety management system,
Wow.
this ASAP program I referred to.
Yeah.
There's other programs that are involved over years. So when I was first with American Airlines and they
Mhm.
mentioned this ASAP program, I thought to myself, ASAP, this will never work.
Yeah.
No one's ever going to tell on themselves. And then, fast forward, years after that, and I find myself in charge of some of the ASAP programs.
Okay.
And so I think that's, for me, I've always been interested in that part of safety.
Hmm.
And there's other safety programs we do too. I mean, one is the flight ops quality assurance, which is kind of we track all the flights, we download after the flights, and we
Right.
look at where we could have gone better, make mistakes.
Right.
For instance, we have what they call LOSA program, line operation safety audits, where
Hmm.
we observe pilots. So all these programs together help with the safety management system we were talking about.
Right.
And part of these, there's 4 components to SMS. One of the components is promotion, which means as you learn things, you tell the pilots why we're going to make a change.
Okay.
So for instance, if we make a change in something and you tell a pilot we're going to make a change, most pilots and dispatcher mechanics
Right.
say somebody in the head shed figured this out, right?
Right.
That's not really true. We have to do a job of telling people why we're making the change. And
Yeah.
then people will say, oh, that totally makes sense to me.
It's a communication thing, and so to be able to adopt the practice. Yeah.
Totally, which is why I'm here today.
Yeah.
Because I'm all about safety promotion and telling people, look, and telling everybody, look, there's a process here. So, I'm always interested in the safety aspect,
Hmm.
and I'll tell you, one of the reasons it did is it made me a better pilot,
Mm.
which is why I told you earlier about other pilots maybe, looking at past accident reports and that, because
Yeah.
it does educate you, and I mean, most of the time everything goes right. So it's
Right.
good to learn when something went wrong. What did
Mhm.
they do wrong? So because of that, I was somewhat always interested in safety. I was actually an instructor at the University of Southern California's aviation safety school.
Okay.
So I've been teaching there for about 10 years,
That's awesome.
which I'm no longer doing because of my new job.
Right.
But that's always what kind of motivated me. So to your question, I've always been an advocate for safety.
Mm,
And I think the industry, besides me, there's a number of people who are advocates for safety, by the
right.
way. But I was fortunate that I was nominated by the
Yeah.
president.
You're
So
recognized.
here I am.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Congratulations on the new role.
I like it. It feels like, for me personally, it not only just something to give back to the industry,
Right.
like a lot of the folks that are on your podcast,
Hmm.
but it also feels like a continuation of the journey I've had with safety. And to me, being a board member for the NTSB is the top of the pinnacle. So I'm
Yeah.
very proud, and I'm
Should
super
be.
happy that I have this opportunity to go down this adventure of
Yeah.
the NTSB.
Yeah, well, I mean that sounds justified to me. I wanted to. You said something in there about the voluntary reporting. I find that so interesting, and don't mind me if I put in a little bit of commentary here. I, as a non-pilot, am very impressed with pilots for their ability to think about the bigger picture of things. Like you said, who's going to voluntarily report their own mistakes? But it's about the bigger picture. It's about the data. How many people are making that like how many people report that same voluntary issue? I guess I didn't say that correctly, but
No,
you
but
know what I'm saying. Like once you get three people saying I made the same mistake for the same reason, maybe we should look into this. I'm sure that's how that goes.
totally.
Yeah.
I could give lots of examples.
Yes.
Tell me
Okay.
if we have the time. But I
Yeah, we
would
do.
say that people might be surprised, but the major carriers, I'm talking about the legacy carriers like, the Deltas, Uniteds, Southwest Americans, and that, people might be surprised, but pilots will make reports every time they fly if there's a mistake they made.
Hmm.
And they're not saying it because they're bad. It's just, hey, this happened to me, and they're making a valid, this happened. People might be surprised, but at most of the legacy carriers, they'll receive anywhere from 8 to 10,000 reports per year.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean that we have a lot of problems,
Right.
but we're identifying a particular, let's say, called a hazard,
Mm-hmm.
that the pilot considers it a hazard.
Mm.
But what's realizing is that now a lot of multiple reports are coming in for the same hazard.
Okay.
So now we can actually fix something. And
Wow.
sometimes it's just like I said, it could be the naming of a fix or a procedure that we're doing or something mechanically that went wrong.
Mm.
And it's like, well, that was just a one-off. In flying, there's no one-offs.
Yeah, you're not allowed for one-offs.
Well, there isn't. There's probably more to it, right? There's
Right.
probably, if we look through the data, I can't take credit for the saying, and everybody seems to take credit for it, but I don't think anybody can really. But there is a saying that we use in safety that your next accident is probably your data set.
Mm.
You just have to find it. And so the thing that you see a lot of safety professionals at the airlines and corporate aviation, and even in your world,
Right.
they're looking through the data,
Mm-hmm.
and they're looking for the signals, not the noise. Noise is there too, but they're looking for the signals
Mhm.
for your next accident. And so that's the one thing that I'm a little bit, I would say I'm positive for the future, is because in the past it was a lot of human intervention for looking for
Right.
these noisy signals. But now they have something called AI.
Yes,
And my kids have told me about it, and I've seen it in action. Actually, I've had some folks that used to work for me. I've seen it.
Right.
But I mean, if I look at that, the potential for making us even safer now is going to exist, I believe, because of the AI tool
Right.
that will look at. Because I will say for the airlines,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not just airlines, it's the corporate aviation too, that there's a lot of data. We're very rich
Right.
in data. It's pulling the information out to get those signals and noise and say, hey, maybe we should look at this a little closer.
Yeah, and I think that's what's amazing is that we're in an age of information and technology, and it's working. It's kind of accumulating into what you guys started before AI was all around, right? It can take all that information. All that feedback loop is just impressive to me, and it takes a type of humility from someone who has so much expertise. That's why I think pilots are just. I mean, I don't know. They're pretty cool. I want to zoom out of here a little bit.
Okay.
And I think we talked about it earlier, but I have to ask you about the movie Flight. Remember them talking about the NTSB in there. And I want to ask you about some of the accuracy there. Like, what can we get from that movie in terms of the NTSB?
Okay, so great question. And I don't know how many of your students would have watched that movie.
Yeah. It's with Denzel Washington. If you haven't seen it, it's very
the movie
entertaining.
Flight, I started to watch it, and about halfway through, I did not watch it to the end
Okay.
because it's a kind of a cool movie as far as a flying scene, but it is completely inaccurate.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even close to the truth as far as how the NTSB operates. There was some perception that there's a meeting the next day. The NTSB does not work that way.
Right.
They are very methodical,
Mm.
fact gathering. It is not. They don't rush. They try to get a report out within a year, just to
Mm-hmm.
give an idea what the time frame is. But something like that, the movie Flight, it's all Hollywood
Yeah.
information, so it's not even accurate. The movie Sully, of course, which is another one that came out. So the movie Sully, I mean, the fact that the animation and the showing of the airplane landing in the river, that's kind of cool to watch on TV or in the movie.
Yeah.
But as far as the NTSB process, as far as the how fast it happened, that it's just not even close to reality. That doesn't
Right.
happen that way. So I would caution people that the movie Flight or the other movies that you might have mentioned,
Yeah.
those are not anywhere near what really happens at
Mm-hmm.
the NTSB. The
Yes.
NTSB is a very methodical fact gathering organization,
Mm-hmm.
and they will not rush just for that kind of social thing. They're not influenced by that. They're
Yeah.
doing their job. So
Yeah.
please don't take anything from those movies as being what the organization I'm with
I always
does.
wondered about that when I was even when I was younger. I was thinking like, "There's no way this is how this works," but
It
so
does
I had
not.
to ask you.
No.
So I mean, I don't think you're the only person I'm probably gonna get the chance to ask. So I had to do that.
Okay.
Um, okay, we're talking about safety here in aviation, though. That's it can be a pretty heavy topic. We see things in the news all the time. Is there anything that you may have be finding yourself involved with that we might even know about publicly?
Oh,
Yeah.
great. Okay. Thanks for that question.
Hmm.
Because the NTSB is an agency that's transparent. I
Okay.
mean, it's transparent to the public.
Right.
Last week, so that would have been the March 19, 2021 timeframe,
Hmm.
the NTSB had a public hearing. The public hearing was on the UPS MD-11 crash in Louisville, Kentucky last
Right.
November.
Okay.
And so when they have a hearing like that, it's a public hearing. So there were the parties I mentioned earlier were there. There were witnesses there from different
Mm.
organizations, and the it's part of the NTSB's fact finding and understanding of really how we got where that accident happened.
Right.
The accident is still an open investigation, so I can't really discuss that piece of it. But I can tell you that this was an investigative hearing, and it's a public investigative hearing,
Okay.
and it was attended. It's actually streamed
Hmm.
for people that wanted to watch it remote.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And so you were telling me earlier that we can find this information. What are some ways we can find? I mean, you already told us about Carol. You said something about YouTube as well.
Yeah, so Carol is more for like data set for mining previous accidents.
Okay.
But if you go on YouTube,
Hmm.
I'm not a big YouTuber,
I got you.
but if you went on YouTube, you can find this hearing that I just referred to. So
Okay.
the NTSB public hearing on the UPS crash,
Mhm.
it's a public hearing. It was a 2-day hearing, by the way. The first day went from 8 in the morning to like 7 o'clock at night, roughly, and the second day was half a day.
Right.
But the entire hearing is available for the public to watch. It's quite technical. I personally found it very interesting because I
Yeah.
like that stuff. But you will see that there were a number of questions asked to witnesses.
Hmm.
The parties got to ask questions to the witnesses. And then the board members, there are 4 board members.
Hmm.
We also got a chance to ask questions with follow up with what we call the staff to follow up on our questions. So
Right.
I think if people were interested, you might find it, you might be surprised at how detailed and how deep the NTSB investigates
Right.
to see what the probable causes were.
Gotcha. And I'm going to make a little bit of a pivot here, but it's still on topic. I want to give this for our viewers and especially our students. It's kind of like a overview sort of question. I want to know if you have off the top of your mind what are some of the most common mistakes that you would say are a threat to safety? And you've talked a little bit about it, and I don't know how much you're allowed to say about this kind of thing without sounding like you're in hot
Well,
water.
yeah, no, that's fine. I common mistakes. Well, let me just say this:
Mhm.
when you look at like ASAP reports
Okay.
for the airlines, the number one reason for ASAPs every month for the last 5-6 years for almost every airline is altitude deviations.
Mm.
So if you're looking for, well, what are mistakes made? They're altitude deviations. Doesn't mean these were large altitude deviations, but means that a pilot made a report like, hey, I might have missed altitude or a little bit off altitude. A lot of times they're happening on the descent because an approach might have got changed and they might have missed something. So
Right.
there's a lot of work. So with that knowledge, being aware that altitude deviations are a number one reason typically through ASAP reports, and they happen many times on the descent.
Mm.
It's an awareness for pilots that are listening that during the descent phase, you really need to pay extra attention because they might change the arrival, which has different fixes, different altitude crossings. So you really have to take a minute to make sure you're ready to fly that approach.
Yeah.
So I think for safety though, obviously in my mind, the airlines, the industry has looked at fatigue as an issue. I think we do have fatigue rules now, which I think I know they've contributed to safety, but it's hard, right? I mean,
Right.
it's hard to raise your hand and say I'm fatigued.
Yeah, it's not easy to say that I'm tired.
It's not easy to say. At least my background, in my background, it was my generation. We just didn't call them fatigue. I think,
especially coming from the military, right?
Right. You just didn't call fatigue because you flew. But I would say that we've improved safety by making that an acceptable practice. That if you're fatigued, you raise your hand. And many times, I would say about fatigue, if it's self-induced, well, then you need to own it. I mean, if you stayed out late at night and didn't get your sleep, then you need to own it, and the airlines will expect you to own that piece. By the way,
right?
But a lot of times it's not something that the pilot did himself, but you're in a weather situation, you have creeping delays, and you finally about ready to go, and then you have a mechanical with the airplane, and now you have to sit with the airplane for a while. Passengers are getting upset about it. There's a number of things contribute. You finally get airborne and you get to your destination, and then now they have a turn they want you to do, for instance.
Yeah.
And you're just spent. You're done.
Yeah.
Maybe in the old days they would have flown that, and nowadays I think, I know pilots will raise their hand and go, you know what, I'm fatigued here.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. So I think that part has been a home run for the industry, is that we are not calling it fatigue. There's not a stigma attached to it.
Okay.
I mean, you have to own it. If you're responsible for it, you do have to own that.
Because it's a blur. It can be a blurry line if someone's not being responsible.
Correct.
But nonetheless, it seems like it's done a lot of good. So
it has, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I think actually, especially the comment about the altitude deviation. I mean, going into a job knowing that it's one of the number one things that gets flagged, then that would be easy to look out for.
So that's the advantage for the folks that are listening to pilots.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information out there already
Okay.
that can help you identify some of the hazards or some of the places where you can expect to have issues. If you reached out to any of the airlines and asked, can I talk to the safety department? They would tell you the same thing that I'm telling you.
Right.
We don't like to advertise, the airlines where the problems are, but in the safety environment, safety is not a secret. We share quite frequently. Just last month or 3 weeks ago, there was what they call the InfoShare.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Have you talked about InfoShare?
I haven't.
Okay, InfoShare
I'm unaware.
Okay, the FAA organizes this and they host it. And at this InfoShare, almost all the safety departments from all the airlines, the corporate operators, some of the schools, the manufacturers, they show up. And what we do is we share information about safety. People who are not invited is the media. Lawyers are not, legal departments are not invited. So it's really supposed to be safety professionals. And I started going and participating back in 2010, and we had maybe 200 people show up. Now there's over 1,000 people that show up.
Wow.
And so the FAA deserves credit for, putting this together, asking people to show up to this. And the FAA themselves shows up, so they're part of this whole safety gathering process. The FAA is very much ingrained in the SMS programs of the airlines. They're actually one of they partner with the airlines on this. But this InfoShare is to me is a it is a better practice.
Yeah.
And one of the things I would like to do at the NTSB is to promote that same concept with the other modes of transportation. For instance, the railroads.
Because NTSB isn't just aviation.
Correct.
So we didn't really,
Right. Yeah, no, there's other modes of transportation.
Yeah.
So, yes, very much so. But, that, to me, this so-called InfoShare, we refer to it as, it's a better practice. And it's a good way for people to exchange. And then you do the networking, right? So the one thing I would say is a lot of the safety professionals, it's certainly in the airline industry, and in the labor associations, they all kind of know each other.
Okay.
So when things are not going quite right, or people go, hey, are you seeing this? So I've had it before where I've called other carriers or in my previous role, or they called me and said, have you seen this? You go, you know what? We actually have seen the same. Wow. And it's amazing how you can fix problems and identify the risks, and you can quickly mitigate them.
It's like almost the ability to cross-reference other industries. I mean, similar industries, I guess, transportation.
Similar. Yeah, no, I would say the aviation industry is very transparent. Transparent, yes. safety is just not a secret.
Right.
They're very much about sharing. We don't use names and we don't do that stuff. It's all
Yeah.
about, have you seen this issue at this airport?
Okay.
Yes, we have. Well,
Awesome.
that's enough to motivate you to go. Maybe it's just not a pilot issue or maybe an airline issue. Maybe it's a systemic issue
Right.
that we need help with our partners, whether it's the FAA
Right.
or the National Traffic Controller Association,
Mhm.
NATCA they call it. It's all, we're all on the same team.
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
that's how people look at it.
And again, that's one of my favorite parts of aviation that I've learned since being here is it's one big team. On that note, have you worked with people? Could you see a difference in the behaviors from people who may have gotten their flying experience from the military versus people who've gotten their flying experience from a civilian training program? And I ask that just because I'm trying to give our audience a bit more perspective on the different ways that people end up where they might be going. I don't know if that's a too open-ended question, but you've flown with a lot of different people, so
Yeah, I would say when I got hired, it was almost predominantly military.
right,
And, over the years, you had more and more civilian background coming in.
right,
My last 10 years, if I flew with somebody, other than asking them, you wouldn't know if they were actually ex-military or civilian, for instance, or they came background with civilian or corporate.
okay,
It was hard to know it. I mean, the airlines are very standardized,
mm-hmm,
and we expect that regardless of your background.
mm-hmm,
And I think the training at the airlines are very much about standardization.
right,
So I think your audience knows this, but like if I was to fly in my previous role and I got assigned a trip on a Friday to go to Haneda, Japan,
yeah,
I don't know the other pilots yet. Now I might look their names up and say, oh, I might know that guy or that gal. But when we show up to fly, it's possible that all four of us pilots have never flown together.
right.
But
If
if you
anything
were
likely, right?
most of them, it could be likely because they could be from another base
Okay, okay,
that might have that might have just came there or whatever.
mm-hmm,
I think people would be very shocked if they were to sit in the jump seat. They would look at the performance and think that we fly together all the time. And the
mm,
reason they would say that is because we're very standardized in the air. I should say, the airline industry is
mm,
very standardized, and that's how
yes,
the training is.
right,
So that's a good thing. So I think maybe in the previous years you could tell a little bit more if a person was ex-military or civilian, but to me at this point it was hard when I flew at the time to say what was your background. Now obviously you ask people what'd you do beforehand and then it comes out, but
right.
I don't think you can tell so much by the flying necessarily.
Yeah, I think I may have asked a similar question to someone you said Pascal.
Oh
We had
yeah,
Pascal Holmes on here.
Pascal.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite podcast episodes. I really love that guy. And he's I don't know. I think more people should go watch that if you guys are still listening. How do you know Pascal? If you don't mind sharing.
No, Pascal is a pilot for American Airlines, and he
Mm-hmm,
was involved in some of the classes for the new captains.
mm-hmm,
And I got to meet him there, and I was always very impressed with his interest in safety. He had a safety background, if you recall, from
yeah,
the U.S. Navy,
yes,
and so he later went into the flight administration side, and he's slowly working his way back, I think, into the safety world. But
yeah,
I respected Pascal from his background and how he got where he made it as a commercial airline pilot. He's a friend of mine. He's a good guy. I like him.
yeah. I like Pascal.
Yeah.
I might have to get him back on here and reach out to him again. He was. I'm very appreciative that he came through. It was one of our first times having someone working in the airlines, not just as a pilot though. He got
Good.
into the administrative side, and
Yep.
I think when he was here, I think he was a chief at
Mhm.
American Airlines.
Correct.
If that's not changed anymore, I'm not sure. But anyways, I enjoyed having him here and thought I'd bring it up. But I asked him something about that too. Do you have any experience with some of the new programs that have been coming up, like Part 141 schools? I mean, I feel like this is becoming much more uh, achievable now, but also there's so many more schools to go to.
Yeah, I would say my experience was the American Airlines because of my position there. I was before I retired, I was the managing director of safety and efficiency at American Airlines. So
Okay.
besides just flying airplanes, I was also in a management role.
Hmm.
American Airlines has at the time 6 or 7 cadet schools. They're sponsored by American Airlines.
Right.
Competitors of yours, I realize that.
Probably so, but we do
Probably.
have an Envoy partnership.
Yeah.
So
course.
you know.
So, but it was a cadet schools, and so they were all over the country.
Hmm.
And so I, as my position in the safety role at American Airlines, I would make it I would make it a point to visit all the cadet schools at least once a year
Okay.
and give a little bit of a background how the airlines do safety,
Okay.
because most of them are going to hopefully be in the airlines.
Right.
And so I would bring my team, not just John here, but the team would
Yeah.
bring posters of our threat air management So we
Okay.
would talk about called TEM, threat area management,
Hmm.
and that was really beneficial for the students because at the end of the day, it's nice for them to see this is what we do for a living as airline pilots, and we look at things like we call it the green, yellow, and red. What position you're in your threat area management.
Okay.
So, so we would take it out. So that was my experience with the 141, the cadet schools,
Hmm.
and I always enjoyed it because I got to talk to the new generation of pilots,
Right.
and they'd ask questions that I always was surprised about, like, "Do I get Christmas off?" No, maybe, probably not. Your
The
first
things you
year.
think about when you're young and
Yeah,
entering your
yeah, no, and I
career.
get it. Do I get my birthday off? Well,
Yeah.
no, you probably don't get your birthday off. But those are legitimate questions, and I think that's important because you're coming into a profession
Hmm.
that you should know what you're getting into.
Right.
I can't see too many people saying I don't want to do that, but there are people who say that may not be for me. And
Hmm.
I've talked about all the good, but I have not been shy about saying some of the, let's say, the negative aspects. Because if you're,
Yes. Oh,
I grew up and my dad was a maintenance machinist, and he
okay.
worked Monday through Friday. Left at 8:30 in the morning, came home every day at 5. We always had dinner every night together.
Okay.
If you're gonna be a pilot, that's not your world. You're gonna be gone 3 days a week, probably, whether you're corporate or whether you're business or commercial. It makes no difference
Hmm.
because you're a pilot and you're flying, and so you're gonna be gone 2 or 3 nights a week.
Yeah.
So you need to know that up front. And you're
Yeah.
gonna be gone for kids' birthdays and maybe for the holidays when you're new and that. So it's not a negative necessarily if you know what's coming, but it should
Right.
not be a shock. We get that is an industry that you're not going to have dinner with your family every night,
Right.
Monday through Friday. It
Right.
just probably won't happen, and
Eh,
you fly on weekends, and so that's a part you should know about.
That's really, I think those are perks of the job. But once you start having a family and there's things to think about, and you're still gonna be home often too, but it's just not. It's you got to think it through a little bit, and I think that's really awesome to think about.
Yeah, I would have to say one thing that the difference is a little bit now. I mean, and I'm going to sound like I'm like an old guy, but back then, we didn't have cell phones, so it wasn't as easy to communicate with the family.
Okay.
You were in a layover, and so it's gotten much better now because you have a cell phone, you could FaceTime, stuff that I still don't even FaceTime much. But the point is, I
Pretty
think there's
awesome.
a better way to it's the communication's easier than it used to be, but the reality is you're still gone, and your spouse may have 2 kids at home and
Wow.
needs a little help because somebody's sick, and you feel bad because you're just not there. So
Exactly.
I would say that I make sure when I tell the new upcoming pilots realize that is something that's going to happen in your career.
Yeah, and I do think also that's actually very insightful. I mean, I remember going home when I was younger when cell phones still weren't quite the thing, and having to wait for a call or trying to catch the right thing on TV at the
Right.
right time.
Yeah.
So it's not everything's on demand all the time. Phone calls,
Right.
FaceTimes, whatever. Um, I still, and I think we've talked about a lot of different things. I have so many questions, so I'm trying to be decisive here. Um, was there anything that you saw at any of these schools that sort of impressed you with the way they operated, and that you thought, man, I wish every school did that? And that's, I don't know if that's an easy question, but I like that question. So,
So yes, I would say that what I recognized from the schools, which I appreciated,
hmm
was what you mentioned earlier, the discipline.
mm,
Every school understood the fact that the rules of engagement, we call it the ROE,
okay,
is you show up on time, can't be late. That's just not acceptable. So I think the schools, everyone I saw that I witnessed, even here at your Thrust Aviation,
yes, sir.
there's an expectation you're going to be on time,
Hmm.
you're going to be prepared to go fly,
Hmm.
and if you're not prepared to fly, then you're probably not going to fly. And I think
Yeah,
the instructors hold the bar high enough that
absolutely.
says, look, that it's just not going to work, because we have a new generation of pilots, and quite frankly, they may not be aware of the fact that we don't, right away we don't answer a cell phone when we're taxiing out,
Yeah,
and if you never got the brief, your phone phone might ring on taxi out, you might answer it.
yeah,
Okay, we just don't do that,
yeah.
and it's not to be mean, but that's the reality. So
Mhm,
I think I appreciate what I have seen is that the schools understand
mm.
that level of discipline is required right now at the beginning, which I know you're doing at your school and the schools I witnessed. And
Patrick does not play. Patrick's our CEO, by the way. Patrick Arns, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with
I
him, but he's very serious about these things. So
yeah, but
he expects a lot of professionalism.
but that's great. That's
Hmm.
what you do, and I think that's fair to the students. If they
Right,
don't understand that, then they will be in for a shock when they go to the airlines or the regional carriers.
right.
So I think starting here at the space level, that's totally appropriate. And I think that's the way it should be. And I'm glad to see that. I haven't seen, like, in my opinion, I haven't seen a slip in anything like that, or accept that. It's, I think the bar is here, and I don't think they moved the bar down, which I
Okay.
appreciate that.
Great, great. I just wanted, I just wanted to know what is that you might have been seeing and seeing if we're living up to that standard. On that note, you did say you came through to one of our thrust days, one of our luncheons where
Mhm.
we do it monthly. We invite people to come check it out. Sort of, it's fun. We have a lot of Chick-fil-A. But how did you end up here that day? Did someone invite you?
They did. Well, Phil Stromer, who's
Oh,
one of
Philip.
your Phil
Yeah.
Stromer, yeah, his son was going to the school here,
Right.
PK.
Yeah.
And so Phil basically said, "Hey, listen, and you should know, for pilots, if you offer them free food, we'll show up."
Yeah.
So Phil was like, "Hey, there's some free food. You want to go?" And I'm like, "Sure, of course." So
Okay.
I went with Phil to this area, and me and Phil had a little presentation about being a pilot, and similar
Yes.
to
I think I
some of the
remember
stuff
now.
we're talking about. We showed up in our uniform so people could see the uniform.
Yes.
Me and Phil don't wear uniforms now because we're both retired.
Right.
But people like Phil and a lot of pilots that are like me, we actually want to give back to the new generation of pilots.
Mm.
Most of us that are retiring, we don't want to just retire and forget about a profession. I
Mhm.
do think that's what I see as a common theme among my fellow pilots that have retired already. They want to give back.
Mm.
They're available. They want to, hang around pilots still. They want to be
Right.
part of that aviation community and not be considered an outsider.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of wisdom to be gained from some of the pilots who've been around for 35, 40 years. I mean, I flew for
I mean, I would
43
imagine.
years. I have to feel like I've got some experience I can pass on to people, but it's not just me. I would say for the pilots that are listening, especially the new generation pilots, take advantage of
Mm.
take advantage of some of these pilots that you've read about, or you met that are older. Mentor
Right.
with some of them, ask them questions, and that you may not want to ask your instructor, but take the time. I mean, there's very few pilots you're going to ask questions that are going to just blow you off. They won't do that
Right.
because they like what they did and they want to see that the new generation is successful pilots.
Right. My favorite thing that pilots tell me is that you know someone's a pilot because they'll tell you.
Pretty much
I think it's
true.
pretty funny. So if you ask them some questions, I'm sure you'll get some answers.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
that
that's
is a
pretty.
true statement.
I hear that all the time, and I'm like, hey, I didn't say it. I do repeat it sometimes because I think it's kind of funny.
That is a true statement.
To zoom out a little bit, since we're probably moving towards the end here,
Yeah.
if you're looking back at your career, obviously you have a much different entry point into aviation than many of our students, right? But is there some short-sightedness that you could look back on yourself and think, oh man, I wish I could, tell my younger self? What would, I think about this a little bit differently. What would you maybe try to say?
I think that's a fair question.
Because
When,
sorry, just to
no,
clarify, because
yeah.
you did mention, when you're getting older and you still want to give back and you still want to participate in aviation, and when you're younger, you can miss out on what people are giving back on. I'm just wanting them to open their minds up and see what's in front of them. That's all.
So that's two things I would say. I
Okay.
think that's great. So the world has changed as far as how pilots are getting here.
Hmm.
I tell a lot of the new generation pilots, because there's a lot of them that were flying in high school. They're getting their hours up and all that stuff. They're great. They're going to get hired by a regional carrier at a young age, but they didn't get their college degree.
Mm.
Okay, that's great. Life's going to be great. Great pilot. But just realize this, though. There may be a point in your career where you might have a medical issue
Hmm.
or something happens that prevents you from flying. And I'm not like Mr. Education here, but I would encourage you to, after you're flying, to go get a college degree
Hmm.
and prepare that if something happened where you couldn't fly, you have something to fall back on. Because if you lost your medical, that's not the time now to go to college for 4 years to get a second career. So
Right.
I think that's one thing because at the time when I was hired, having a college degree, even a master's, was almost required. So
Hmm.
that has changed now, but I do want to make sure the new generation's aware of the fact that not everybody gets to make it to 65 to
Right.
retirement, and it could be, later in years from now. So
Yeah.
I think that's one thing. The other thing I think is that, and I know I see a lot of retired pilots that I talk to, if all you did was to fly for 35 years, that's really fun. But,
Mm.
it's nice to look back that you gave something to your profession. And so I do think that is something that I feel good about. I know a lot of my fellow pilots do too, whether they were volunteering in the safety department of the
Right.
labor association, excuse me, or they volunteered as a chief pilot, or they wanted to do something other, but even to be, like you mentioned, some of the pilots like a check airman.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's other things you get involved in, but doing something else for your profession, even if it means going to the local high school and doing or being on a podcast when you get
Yeah.
older. But I think you'll feel better about when you retire. Because for me, looking back, I'm glad that I had the ability to do something
Mm,
other than just fly aircraft for
right.
35 years. I enjoyed that; it was great. But that was nice to have something else that you can say, "Hey, I also did this."
Another way
And
to interact with the thing that you're doing, other
yeah,
than
no,
the flying. Just it gives you another attachment to it, if anything.
yeah, it
Uh,
is, and I think that's if you're going to be at an airline for 35 or being in aviation 40 years, you probably can contribute one thing to
mm,
your profession. So find a way to contribute that, whether it's being a check airman, like I mentioned, or a check pilot they now refer to as, or something in helping out at school, or anything.
yeah, yeah.
I just think anything that you can look back and say, hey, I'm glad I helped out or I did something.
Well, and I imagine that to be very insightful. Actually, a lot of people can think in a straight line. I know I can tend to sometimes, so that's very insightful. And I have to follow up the degree. And is it outlandish to think about getting a degree while flying as an airline pilot? And I just ask that because I hear people talk about doing that, and the lifestyle is quite different than if you were working Monday through Friday. So, what would you say
Mm.
it would look like to get a college degree while being an airline pilot?
So I would say it's going to be difficult. You're going to have to work hard at it. But I can tell you, I know a number of pilots who in the years that I was at American Airlines that the kids were out of the house now and they had extra time, that they went to law school.
Mm,
So I know a number of pilots who in their 30s, 40s, 50s went to law school, and that's not easy. They were doing it, or they got a degree or they got a master's or something.
mhm.
It's doable, but you don't. You want to first you want to be the master of your craft.
Right.
So because if you're going to be a first officer on an Airbus aircraft,
Mhm.
and now you're the master of your craft, you've got the skill set down. Then the time to look at it, say, do I have extra time? And if you want to go get that college degree or get your master's or any other professional education, that's the time to do
Yeah.
it. Don't start this process where you're in the middle of training at your school, or
Yeah.
you're going through a new aircraft type thing. That's probably not the time to start that.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, again, could probably ask you a day's worth of questions, but I think we've got a good handful of them in here in the last hour or so, and I couldn't thank you enough for sitting down with us and speaking about first of all the NTSB. I mean, I think there's a little bit of it could be a little bit of a black hole. People don't know
Hmm.
about the organizations that keep us safe. So I appreciate you for that. And is there anything you'd like to add on before we go? I mean,
No, I know probably most of the audience are pilots,
mhm,
which is great. But even if you're not a pilot, I wish everybody success in their careers, and
yes.
I think you have an exciting road ahead of you. If you're part of the younger generation, I tell people if you've seen some of the airplanes that
Hmm.
are being proposed to be flown,
Yes.
one of them is a supersonic boom, and they're going to be flying 1.7 Mach, and that might not be but 20 years away maybe.
Yeah.
So some of the folks watching now will probably fly aircraft like that, or if they're maintaining those aircraft or dispatching those aircraft or flight attendants on these airplanes.
Right.
So to me, the future's really exciting. I mean, I know when I got started as a 720 N7 engineer,
Yeah.
I never thought I could be flying something like the 787, but the
Right.
technology is so much better. And so when you look at the future, so I would have to say good luck in your career. I hope you'll do something besides just fly and keep that your primary job. And the best advice I can give you is keep the blue side up.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much, John. Or as I say, wait, hold on. Sorry, I have to say your name just right. Okay, Duluth. Gotcha. I have to say it just right. Thank you, Member Duluth, for joining us on another episode of Pilots Say What, where we get to hear what pilots have to say, or in this case, Member Duluth. And we'll see you guys next time on the next episode.
Thanks a lot.
Yes.
See ya. All right.
Thank
See
you.
ya.